It's an absolute privilege to have 15 minutes with one of Australia's great technology founders. Let's face it. I think it's worth laying some context for the audience. There he is. G'day, Nick. Thanks for joining us. I was just giving some context to the audience. I think we all know about the $29 billion acquisition USD of Afterpay by Square, now Block. But probably what most people don't know is Nick is now running the sales and marketing organisation across the entire Block ecosystem. So that's Square, CashApp, and of course Nick's baby, Afterpay. Block's become a little bit of a battleground stock for investors, let's be honest. And in the spirit of Sohn, I feel my duty to give a very quick mini pitch before the Q&A begins. Block reported last week, in fact, gross profit grew 19% in the quarter year on year. Earnings are going to double in the next financial year. It trades on 5 times gross profit, 14 times PE. A reminder, PayPal grows mid-single digits, also trades on 5 times GP. And of course, we have Australian banks that don't know how to spell the word growth that trade on 15 times PE. So this is a business that is cheap by every metric. In the next 6 to 7 years, Block will probably produce, free cash flow, the equivalent of its current enterprise value. So if you like what you hear, it is a core holding of HM1, but Nick, you're the star of the show. I'm going to shut up and ask a couple of questions. Thanks for joining us. Maybe let's go back in time quickly, back to when Afterpay was acquired by Square. What was the rationale in your mind? What was the opportunity for Afterpay to sit inside this Block ecosystem?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. When we first started the conversations with Block, what became really clear was 2 things from my perspective. The first was the immense opportunity that existed within Block if it could connect 2 sides of its own ecosystem and in its own business, being Square and CashApp. And it felt like Ant and I had really kind of done that dash in building Afterpay and building a true 2-sided network. And so we could just see the dynamics at play, see how you could bring consumers into sellers and drive foot traffic and business to them, and lean on those sellers to drive customer acquisition for the consumer side of the business. And so I believed in that thesis. And then secondly, what we really believed was that, particularly in CashApp, which has 57 million monthly active consumers in the US market, we believed that there was a strong opportunity to bring Afterpay into that brand and into that app and ecosystem. And ultimately, the consumer scale would be one of the primary drivers of growth if we looked forward, the next, medium term. And you're starting to see, that consumer side of the pay in 4 market start to prevail. And we're still definitely at the early stages of bringing Afterpay and CashApp together. But I am as bullish as I was when the deal was announced. Been a lot of hard work integrating 2 companies together. Was not easy under any stretch of the imagination, but now we're firmly focused on execution. Feels fun.
Yeah, and certainly a bit easier given both share a common mission around economic empowerment. Maybe just to play on that theme a little bit, how is that opportunity or thesis, as you called it, playing out today?
Yeah, so we're coming up on 3 years. It'll be 3 years in January since we joined forces with Block. First period of time was really about integrating the teams in together into a single organization structure and embedding Afterpay into the CashApp framework. And well in motion from that perspective. All is checked, and we're operating as part of Block now. So I moved from kind of like my primary remit being running Afterpay to running the sales function, and then still kind of leaning in on the Afterpay matrix and the P&L. And then really set in motion how we're going to execute this strategy of Afterpay showing up within Cash App. How can we build it in a way that's properly native and organic? What a lot of people don't know is kind of the scale of the Cash App card. 24 million monthly active Cash App card consumers now in the US market. So I think it's about 40% of monthly active have the debit card. One of the largest debit card programs in the US. And so now the focus has been how we're going to bring Afterpay onto the Cash App card, and how we're going to really bring these brands and these ecosystems closer together, where we can play to the strength of both networks. And so still not, in market to the extent that we would desire, but I think all the building blocks are there for us to, really get after executing the strategy in due course.
It's awesome to hear you so fired up about the opportunity. I mean, one of the few people in the world who could genuinely choose to do anything with their time, and yet you choose to stay in the weeds as an operator and grow this business. Maybe just leaning into this new role, leading the sales, or what are the top priorities on your mind? What's on the to-do list in the immediate term?
Yeah, my wife has asked me that question that you just said, and actually I get asked it at like many of the all hands, and if I don't want to show up to work with the same intensity that I showed up at Afterpay, I should stop working. But the progress that we've made over what in hindsight is a pretty short period of time, but when you're going through it, probably feels longer than is the reality, has been fantastic. And to see Block move from a functional org structure where you had a Cash App business unit and a Square business unit to a functional org structure that's running both brands, I think it really illustrates the desire to realize this ecosystem strategy that Jack speaks about often. And the fact that Block is on both sides of the counter, being the seller side and the consumer side, it's dealing with millions of sellers and tens of millions of consumers, and it has such a diversified set of assets within its portfolio, is incredible. It's like a playground that you can kind of dream of, right? And to work with the rest of Jack's direct reports, who, in my honest opinion, are just masters of their craft, is a real privilege. And so it feels like the right structure set up, the right authority and direction is kind of in place. Now it's about execution and really breaking down those barriers that used to exist from a business unit perspective, and realizing the synergetic opportunity, not just between Afterpay and Cash App, but just the broader Block universe.
You talked about Jack there, referring to Jack Dorsey. It's fair to say he's a little bit of an enigma. Not many people in this room know him or have any insight into his character. There's a certain outside-in view, I guess. Maybe you can take us inside the room. What's he like as an operator, as a leader, and particularly your relationship with him? This dynamic of two great founders, but that there are clear reporting lines.
Yeah, look, Jack is a true visionary. I think, there aren't many people you meet that can legitimately see the future, and you can hand on heart believe that is Jack, and his experience and what he's achieved is just a clear illustration of that. It's pretty special to be still a founder-led business. I think that's really important to me. And I think, I've never asked him the question, but my feeling is there's kind of mutual respect of what it represents to be a founder. And in many ways, I think all of his direct reports, he kind of treats with that entrepreneurial spirit, and he sets the direction, and he sets the accountability and the criteria of what success looks like, but then he lets you operate. And so how he assembled this team, how that team's come together as a unit, and then how he steers the ship, but kind of gives the authority and responsibility down within the business. For me personally, is a massive plus. I think a big reason why I'm as excited as I am.
Can you give it a little bit more flavour as to how that gels with you as a leader and your own leadership style?
Yeah. Look, a lot of this was kind of well tested when Ant and I were co-CEOs in a way. You know, we would figure out what our lanes were, and we would separate, conquer with deep trust in each other and deep alignment in one another. And so, you know, part of it's just how do you set a really clear plan, and how do you then prove that you deserve the resolute accountability for it. But, you know, we try and function in the same way within our business. We've been fortunate to hire some of the best people in the world into Afterpay. I think Afterpay's success was a lot about the quality of people we were able to bring in at times when we didn't deserve for them to join our organization, and everyone punched well above their weight. And so, yeah, it feels like definitely the cultures between Afterpay and the broader Block universe are very similar, and I think it starts with leadership.
And the last question from me relates to a little forward-looking statement, so to speak. So you might need to be careful. But, you know, in 5 years' time, if you look back on the success of Block, what are the key things that you think you're going to look back on, you know, with pride as to the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a natural reality that Afterpay is very close to my heart. And so when you pick a home you referenced it as your like my baby, when you pick a new home and you accept what that means, what you want is that it achieves its full potential as a function of the decision that you made. And it feels like that vision is coming to life. So, you know, first and foremost, I'm excited for Pay in Forward to continue to scale across the world and to be the next generation of how this younger consumer, well, not so young anymore because millennials are in their mid-30s, but you know how this next generation consumer spends their money. And then from a Block perspective, I just think the competitive advantage sits in how well both sides of the ecosystem connect with one another. And you've got network effects prevailing in each brand in its own right. But if they can be connected and fueling the other side of the equation, you know, that's where I think the next spin of the flywheel and the next network effect prevails. And so, you know, they're the two things that you know, that I believe in and, you know, I'm focused on.
It's awesome. Personally, as a current shareholder, and hopefully there are lots of shareholders here from HM1, thank you so much for your time out of a busy day. I get fired up listening to hear you talk about the business. So thank you, Nick Molnar.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me.